Hey guys, welcome back to AP Flores. Today we're going to be taking our first real dive into the AP Business Curriculum with Unit 1.1. What is a business and how does it create value? So let's begin. Now imagine you're standing in a store looking at two water bottles and they're the exact same size and made from the same material. What's the difference? It isn't the bottle itself, but rather the value that the company has created around the product. And understanding value creation is one of the most important concepts that you'll be learning in AP Business. Hopefully, by the end of today's lesson, you should be able to define what a business is, explain how these businesses create values, distinguish between goods and services, and identify the major types of organizations. Because these aren't just vocabulary words you'll memorize for a quiz, they're rather ideas you'll use throughout the entire AP Business course. Nearly every future unit builds on today's lesson, so make sure you understand these concepts properly before moving on. So what exactly is a business? At its core, every business follows the same basic system. It starts with inputs, things like workers, materials, money, and technology. These inputs go through a process where they are transformed, and that transformation produces outputs, the final goods or services that customers actually buy. And here's the key idea. A business only succeeds if these outputs create value for the customer. Think of business as a system. Inputs go in, processes transform them, and outputs create value. Every business begins with inputs, which are the resources needed to operate. These include labor, materials such as raw ingredients or supplies, capital, which is the money used to fund operations, and technology, which helps improve efficiency. Think about a coffee shop. Before it can sell a single drink, it needs employees, coffee beans, espresso machines, cups, electricity, and money to pay rent. None of these create value by themselves, but they're the starting point. Once a business has its inputs, it begins the transformation process. This is where value starts to develop. Coffee beans are roasted, ground, brewed, and turned into a finished drink. Wood becomes furniture, fabric becomes clothing. Even service businesses transform inputs. A tutoring company, for example, takes the knowledge of its teachers and transforms it into better learning for students. The process is where resources become something customers actually want. The final result is called the output. The output is a good or service that customers purchase, but producing an output isn't enough. A business creates value only if customers believe that the output is worth more than the resources used to make it. In other words, if the benefits outweigh the cost, value has been created, and that's the goal of every business, regardless of its size or its industry. Let's look at Starbucks. From a purely functional perspective, Starbucks sells coffee, but millions of people are willing to pay several dollars more than they would at home. Why? Because Starbucks isn't only selling coffee. It's selling convenience, a consistent experience, comfortable stores, recognizable branding, and customization. Customers aren't paying for beans and water, they're paying for everything surrounding the product. And that's an excellent example of value creation in the business world. Moving on, not every business has the same goal. For-profit organizations aim to earn money for their owners or shareholders. Success is usually measured through profits and growth. Non-profit organizations, on the other hand, exist to accomplish a mission, such as education, healthcare, or community service. They still need revenue to operate, but instead of distributing profits to owners, they reinvest those funds back into achieving their mission. Now let's talk about the difference between goods and services. Businesses provide goods, services, or a combination of both. Goods are the physical products that customers can own, like iPhones, shoes, or laptops. Services are activities performed for customers such as tutoring, haircuts, or streaming subscriptions. In reality, many businesses combine both. For example, Apple sells physical products like iPhones, but it also provides services such as Apple Music, iCloud, and Apple Care. Here's an important tip for the AP exam. College Board rarely asks you to simply define vocabulary. Instead, you'll be given a business scenario and asked to analyze it. You might need to identify the inputs, explain how value is created, or determine whether a company is providing goods or services. Focus on understanding how these ideas work together rather than memorizing isolated definitions. Let's try to test your understanding. A company purchases leather, hires workers, and manufactures custom sneakers. It then sells each pair for more than it costs to produce them. Which statement best describes what's happening? A. Nonprofit activity. B. Value destruction. C. Value creation through transformation. Or D. Service-only business. Pause the video if you want a moment to think before we go over the answer. Okay, so here's the answer. The correct answer to this question was C. Value creation through transformation. The company begins with inputs like labors and materials. It transforms those inputs into finished sneakers through manufacturing, and customers are willing to pay more than the production cost. That's exactly what value creation looks like. The company isn't providing only services, and is clearly generating value rather than destroying it? Tell me how you guys did in the comments and if this was a hard question. We're now approaching the end of our video, so let's review everything we covered. Every business starts with inputs, transforms those resources through a process, and produces outputs that customers value. Businesses may be for profit or non-profit, and they provide goods, services, or both. Most importantly, remember that businesses don't succeed simply because they make products. They succeed because they create value that customers are willing to pay for. And that's everything for Unit 1.1. Congratulations, you just learned one of the most important ideas in the entire AP Business course. In our next lesson, we'll move into business objectives, where we'll explore why businesses set goals, how they measure success, and why these goals sometimes conflict with one another. Thank you so much for watching AP Flores. If this lesson helped you at all, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the AP Business series, and I'll see you in the next one.